everybody, this is Kodak here, and time for some more fun co-extra content. It seems like all I do on here is Warhammer, but anyway, let us get into it. So we are having a very interesting situation in Warhammer Age of Sigmar with the lead up to Warhammer Age of Sigmar 4th edition. Now, we are currently on 3rd edition. 3rd edition is a lot of what I play, but what is happening is that they've made an announcement about a lot of figures that are leaving the range. And of course, a lot of people are distressed about it. A lot of minis are going away. A couple of armies are getting shifted over. A bunch of Chaos Warbands are being eliminated. Of course, we've also had a lot of people who are very upset. We've had some colossally bad takes already. Like, I had somebody who tried to, somebody in one of their videos tried to claim that Stormbringer is somehow being affected by this. It's not. I double-checked. Every single unit in Stormbringer is not affected by this culling. They might have meant Mortal Realms, which was a magazine from 4 years ago, but anyway, I'll get into it. My thoughts on it are somewhere more in the middle, and it's not because I'm impartial about this. Most of you know that I am a Stormcast Eternals player, and I am thus affected by this directly. So, yes, I'm a Stormcast Eternals player. Here's my nice, lovely Lord Imperatant there. I'm sure a lot of you can complain about his paint job all you want. But as a Stormcast Eternals player, I'm directly affected by this, but even I am somewhere in the middle, because I think that there's a lot good in this announcement, at least from a business perspective, from a future perspective, but I also understand the dangerous precedent that it sets. Anyway, starting with it, the thing that I most want to stress, that I feel like you should probably most take away in this whole situation, is that this article is ripping the Band-Aid off. That is what this article is. It is ripping the Band-Aid off now to avoid trouble down the line. Now, when Warhammer 40k transitioned over to 10th edition, there was a bit of a scandal involving the Leviathan Dreadnought model. The Leviathan Dreadnought model was made for the Horus Heresy side game, but a lot of people were using it in 40k because they did give it stats in 40k. Come 10th edition, which was only a few months after the Leviathan Dreadnought was released, and there are no rules for the Leviathan Dreadnought in standard play, and that made a lot of people upset. The reason they went with it that way is they wanted the Leviathan Dreadnought to stick to Horus Heresy. Horus Heresy is sort of its own thing. To my understanding, Horus Heresy is more an initiative by the company formerly known as Forgeworks. There's actually, based on what I've assessed, there's actually 2 companies within Games Workshop. You have Citadel, which do your Age of Sigmar, your 40k, your standard stuff, and then you have Forge World, or the company formerly known as Forge World, which I think is called System Parts Works or something, I don't know, who does the Horus Heresy stuff, and they have made the step to make the Old World, which is a return to Warhammer Fantasy. So, yeah, one of the things that has caused this thing to erupt is the fact that Warhammer Age of Sigmar was the replacement for the old Warhammer Fantasy. Warhammer Fantasy is where Warhammer in general got its start. It's actually kind of amusing to look at the old Warhammer 40,000 miniatures, because it is very clearly, especially in in the case of the orcs, that it's miniatures from Warhammer Fantasy just with guns on them instead. That's literally what the orcs are. So Warhammer Age of Sigmar is not even 10 years old. It is a pretty new system. So the idea that they're already rotating out miniatures when the whole promise of Warhammer is that the minis are expensive, yes, but you'll be able to use them for years and years and years and years and years. This kind of Age of Sigmar was already kind of a refresh in a line that was already not doing great. More people were into 40,000, but this there's a lot of people who are contested on it. But I'm glad they're tearing off the Band-Aid now rather than waiting until data cards and things are released to create another Leviathan Dreadnought scandal. Like I said, this is a calculated move to get this all out of the way. They're actually being upfront and honest with us rather than being deceptive or something that might be presumed as deception, as was the case with 10th edition and the Leviathan Dreadnought. They're just getting this out of the way first. So the things most affected by this, there of course were the Stormcast. I'm a Stormcast player. I want to save them for last. The Skaven. The Skaven are seeing a lot of models disappear. However, this is because they're about to get a range refresh. The new starter box is going to be based on the Radicalism. So it would not surprise me if most of these are just straight up getting a reprint in the new box set. Like I have the Dominion box set for 3rd edition because it was so cheap, because it's actually kind of unpopular. It was incredibly cheap. They thought it would be as popular as Imperium, and it just kind of wasn't. So I assume most of these Skaven are going to be there. They're just getting a range refresh. Speaking of range refresh, we've already seen like the Liberator data cards. We saw things like Persecutors in like the trailers, so I assume they're getting a makeover, but again, more on that later. The big ones are like the Bone Splitters and the Beasts of Chaos. These are a sub-faction and a complete faction that are getting removed from Age of Sigmar entirely. Now, Beasts of Chaos and Bone Splitters were both grandfathered into Age of Sigmar as part of the process to transition from Warhammer Fantasy into Age of Sigmar, but neither the Bone Splitters nor really the Beasts of Chaos have gotten like a big aggressive range refresh, and they're also both coming back in Warhammer Old World. Like I said, this is to prevent something from like the Leviathan Dreadnought situation, where if they still had Bone Splitters and Beasts of Chaos as legal in Age of Sigmar, and they put out Bone Splitters and Beasts of Chaos sets in Old World, people will be like, oh, are these legal in Age of Sigmar? And Games Workshop would say no, and the people would get mad, like, it's the Leviathan Dreadnought all over again. This is expressly to prevent that. In the case of the Bone Splitters, I am assuming that it's because they're largely getting replaced by the Cruel Boys, who have kind of that same sort of like savage, like swamp dweller, like shirtless orc aesthetic. I assume that's the idea, is that the Cruel Boys are just kind of be taking their place in Age of Sigmar, while the Bone Splitters will get to shine more in Old World. As for the Beasts of Chaos, from my understanding, most people who were playing Beasts of Chaos were mostly just running Chaos Demons and stuff anyway. But like I said, I know a lot of people are attached to these armies. A lot of people I know are fans of like the Beasts of Chaos. And, you know, they already went through the trouble of rebasing their minis from squared around, and now they have to change them back. I understand why people are upset about this, but like I said, it's to prevent a second situation like we got with Horus Heresy, where they put out a bunch of models, a bunch of, you know, dreadnoughts and land raiders that turned out to not be legal for play in 10th edition because of, like I said, that divide that, you know, they want to kind of keep the games separate. It's a brutal cut, I know, but I mean, first of all, there's Old World if you still want to play Beasts of Chaos. Like I said, it's going to be a pain in the butt to rebase your minis yet again. But they're at least these have somewhere to go. Slaves to Darkness is a bit of a different case. Now, the thing about these Slaves to Darkness units is that they are like different tribes, different warbands who struggle from the game Warcry. Now, Warcry has now become sort of the Age of Sigmar equivalent to Warhammer Kill Team. I do like it. I was store champion with my good old Stormcast Eternals. But the narrative of Warcry is that it was a bunch of different like bands and fighters trying to garner the attention and approval of the gods of chaos, and my assumption is that in 4th edition we have our winner, which renders all of these other warbands kind of redundant. I assume they are still going to be legal for play in Warcry, considering that that is the narrative that they are from. I would actually be surprised if they were cut from Warcry, but the idea is that they are no longer going to be legal for Age of Sigmar, and instead are sort of more like the Blood Bowl treatment, I guess. The idea is that you're playing as these different chaos tribes. So Warcry, I guess, is just going to kind of be a moment in time now. Of course, there's also some basic housekeeping. They're getting rid of the resin kits. For a while, there was a brief span, especially like for Custodes players, also for anybody who liked the Krieg, also had to basically get their stuff from the Forge World kits, and they're just kind of doing some basic housekeeping. They wiped out a bunch of kits last year and replaced them with plastic. I don't think it would be out of sorts to expect that these also get replaced in plastic. That's how it worked last time. So I can understand that a lot of these are some kind of brutal cuts, especially with the Bone Splitters, especially with the Beasts of Chaos, but all of them at least have an explanation. They're going to Old World, or Warcry is its own thing about tribes fighting to be the big boss in the army of the Slaves to Darkness to get the approval of the Chaos Gods. We know that the Radicalism is getting a line refresh, but the interesting one is Stormcast Eternals, and this is the one that I think I've seen the worst takes on. And listen up, I'm a Stormcast Eternals player, so I would like it if my voice was the one that was paid attention to. So, a lot of lines are being cut, like 23, and remember, a lot of these have like alternative builds, so assuming that they're not getting any kind of replacement, it's more like 30 units are getting removed from the lineup. But here's the thing. Most of these units that are getting removed are garbage. They are units that nobody's using. Celestar Ballista. Seriously, who is using the Celestar Ballista? It is considered one of the biggest jokes in Stormcast Eternals. Like the Celestar Ballista, the Evocators, the Sequitors, the Knight Heralder. These are units that even before their retirement was announced were already basically retired. They were garbage bargain basement units that you could easily get entire squads of for $10 on eBay. My Celestar Ballista, including shipping, was less than $8 when I bought it off of eBay. Nobody was really using these except maybe Lord Castellant, maybe the Paladins, maybe the Judicators, although it's probably safe to say that the Judicators, we already know that the Liberators are getting a refresh. The Persecutors we know are getting a refresh. The Judicators probably will, or they're going to have the Vigilers step up to be from being part-time battle line to being full-time battle line, although apparently battle line isn't a thing anymore. It's going to be absolute madness. But I'm looking at these, and these are units that I have never seen on the tabletop. They are ones that people are not using. Now, for the case of the Castigators, this is the easy build kit that only includes 3. Ideally, you take them in squads of 5. This is the set that I think comes in like the Underworld starter. I assume like the regular Castigator set. I know the regular Gryph-hound set is going to still be around, but the regular Castigators might still be around too. A lot of these were in Mortal Realms, but here's the thing, is 2nd edition was actually super unpopular. So let's talk about the biggest problem with the Stormcast Eternals. When Age of Sigmar was released, Games Workshop designed the Stormcast Eternals to be sort of the face of the brand, the way Space Marines are for 40k. So they made them look a lot like Space Marines with the stocky build and the big pauldrons and stuff like that, and people hated it. People chafed against it so bad. There were jokes, oh, the Sigmarines, oh, the Land Marines, oh, Space Marines in fantasy, ooh. A lot of people made fun of them. These are the figures that people were making fun of. These are the ones that are getting removed, are the ones people were making fun of, and the ones that nobody uses. So a lot of people are saying, oh no, they're destroying the line. It's the things that nobody's using. Like, Knight Incantor isn't on this list. Knight Incantor is still being made. People use Knight Incantor. Lord Relictor is not on this list. People use Lord Relictor. It's the same with the Dracoths. If it's a unit that actually sees a lot of use, you know, the Vanguard Long Strikes and all of that, those have been completely left alone. It's also pretty safe to guess that a number of these are getting remeets. I mean, Knight Heralder was sort of a nightmare because it used terrain pieces for its effect, and what qualifies as terrain was something that you might have to debate. But they just kind of lacked a visual identity, and in 2nd edition they were like, oh, I know how we can fix it. Let's put more clothes on them. So the big problem with the old Stormcast Eternals is they were kind of needlessly complex. The shoulder pads were a bit of a nightmare to paint. Their weird stockiness made them look too much like Space Marines. They just were not a very appealing design, and just adding fabric to that, adding more complexity on top of that, they were really complex. Like, look at the Paladin there. The Paladin has just so much going on. The Paladin and the Lord Castellant, they have just so much going on there. They are a huge pain to paint, and I am a Stormcast player. I have painted those. It is a huge, huge pain in the butt. The Paladins, too, are just kind of this weird thing. A lot of them were really, like, needlessly complicated. Like, it says the Paladins here, but this has, like, 3 or 4 alternative titles, each with different weapons. And it's not like, oh, it's not Paladins with long spears, Paladins with great hammers. No, it's like Paladins and I don't know, like Protectors and Justicators, or I don't know. There were so many different weird names for it. That's kind of something that 3rd edition really solved. Now, the big thing with 3rd edition is the introduction of the Thunderstrike armor. And the Thunderstrike armor was where Stormcast Eternals finally got a visual aesthetic that really felt like it was their own. They were no longer short and stocky like Space Marines. They were big and limber. They were their armor was a lot more compact and efficient, and they actually had a visual distinction that made them not look like Space Marines. And they actually like hand you a card when you go to Games Workshop that's like, hey, get one of these minis for free, and you have like the short little Space Marine and the big tall Vindictor, which, you know, just looks so great and imposing. They look so different, and I think that's important. Stormcast Eternals finally has their own aesthetic, their own look, thanks to the Thunderstrike armor. Now that I think about it, just to clarify, when I'm talking about the older designs, I'm going to be calling them the SIGMARines, because that's what a lot of people called them, and the new ones I'm going to be calling Thunderstrikes, just to keep that clear. Everything on this list is a SIGMARine, and I assume a lot of it is they're giving it a range refresh akin to what they're doing with the Skaven. The Skaven are a very old line. They have needed updates for a while, but I believe what they're doing with the Stormcast Eternals is they're going to be anything that isn't getting rotated out is going to get a Thunderstrike makeover. We already know the Liberators are getting a Thunderstrike makeover. And by the way, according to their data card, they don't have a new name. So if you want to use your old Liberators, you still can, I assume. But they're already getting a makeover to more resemble Thunderstrike. So that's kind of the positive here. One is they're culling a lot of the unnecessary complexity, a lot of the data cards and war scrolls that nobody was using. Stormcast Eternals have like over 80 sheets, and culling like 30 of them is actually a pretty big step in the right direction. It's also an admission that, hey, when we rolled these guys out the first time, we made a mistake. We piled on too many of them. Their design was not as distinct as you make it out to be. So now that we have the Thunderstrike armor that actually has a unique aesthetic and actually makes a unique statement, everything Thunderstrike just feels so much better, except maybe the Knight Incantor. The Knight Arcanum can't hold a candle to the Knight Incantor's get out of jail free card. But, you know, the Vindictors are very clearly built for purpose. The Annihilators are very clearly built for purpose in ways that the Paladins and their 12,000 variants really aren't. I'm hoping that these new versions of like the Liberators and no doubt the Judicators and the Persecutors will feel like they have a more distinct role to play. At the same time, I understand that this does set a dangerous precedent. Specifically the fact that most of the sets that are getting retired, not a single one of these Stormcast Eternals model kits is more than 10 years old. Some of them are as young as 6. And like I said, that kind of breaks the promise made before about how you could buy a Warhammer kit and it will last you for years and years and years and years. This kind of breaks that promise. What I worry is that this will cause Games Workshop to say, oh no, we messed up on one of our line designs and we're going to be retiring everything to replace it with all new ones that we sure hope you buy. This better not become a habit, is what I'm saying. Is I see why they did it here. A lot of people regard the original designs of the Stormcast Eternals as a mistake, and that the Thunderstrike armor fixed it. I have not seen a lot of people dispute that, but at the same time, I don't want them doing this constantly with new factions. I don't want them to, like 2 or 3 years down the line, introduce a new version of squats that we have to buy. They've already done it with Space Marines and Primaris, although Primaris have been slowly rolled out over the course of like 3 editions. So they cushioned the blow with that a bit, and it's kind of nice that the Primaris actually like reasonably tower over other human beings now. I mean, honestly, the Space Marines did need a range refresh when they rolled out the Primaris. What people mostly took objection to is that you had to get Primaris instead of Firstborn Space Marines. They're 2 different things. I don't think that's going to be happening with the Stormcast Eternals. Like I said, we've already gotten the data card for the Liberator. Nagash, oh boy. Hand of Dust. They're bringing back the weird mini games that I heard about from the first edition. But yeah, the Liberators actually have a data card now, and it just says Liberators. I see Order, Stormcast Eternals, Warrior Chamber. I don't see anything like distinguishing Thunderstrikes, so I assume you can still use your old Liberators with this data card. So it's not like they're just totally replacing things. This is, a lot of it is going to be a range refresh. And like I said, the stuff that's getting thrown away is garbage. It's stuff that people weren't using. Like I said, maybe the Lord Castellant, maybe some of the Paladins, maybe the Judicators, but nobody was like seriously using the Persecutors because they just kind of show up and do nothing. Nobody was using Sequitors. Sequitors and Evocators are the two cheapest units on eBay. The Celestar Ballista might be the only thing that beats them. It's units that nobody was using. That's the simple fact of it. Talk about how people's armies were wiped out when they were already worthless. It doesn't really work that way. Like I said, I just hope this doesn't become a thing. A lot of people are worried that this is going to become a thing, that they're going to be wiping out entire armies, and they're going to be forcing range refreshes like in less than 10 years. In this case, they're very clearly fixing a mistake. And like I said, if nothing else, the thing I want you to take away from this the most is that this is them pulling the Band-Aid off. They're getting this stuff done out front so they can avoid another Leviathan Dreadnought debacle. That's really all I have to say on this. So, yeah, have fun. Until next time, this is Kodak signing off.